I haven't looked at Staples stock lately or what the compensation of the CEO is, but I suspect that they could well afford to treat their workers favorably. When I hear large corporations that make billions of dollars in profits trying to blame our interest in providing health insurance as an excuse for cutting back workers' wages, shame on them.
It's really disingenuous of the president to claim that Staples is to blame for their workers having to work fewer hours. People warned the president that if he signed Obamacare, that this would happen, that people would lose jobs, people would lose hours, people would lose income, but he signed it anyway.
Well, 3 days left to sign up in the open enrollment period for Obamacare, and this as the president takes aim at the office supply chain Staples. As you heard him there, well, the company has fired back, releasing a statement through a spokesperson. The initial story was misleading, as our policy regarding hours for part-time employees is more than a decade old. It predates the Affordable Care Act by several years. It's unfortunate that the president is attacking a company that provides more than 85,000 jobs and is a major taxpayer. Let's begin there with our panel. Syndicated columnist George Will, Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, George.
Well, the president's mastery of the private sector is not evident. He's spent little time in it and has run nothing in the private sector. So for him to be lecturing a company with an almost $11 billion market capitalization and, as they say, 85,000 employees is a bit strange, particularly when his complaint is that he thinks, and to some extent it may be true, that Staples' employment policies are having the predicted and predictable effect of Obamacare, forcing companies to, not forcing, but giving them a powerful incentive to cut back on the number of full-time employees and defining a full-time employee as 30 hours a week. He should not be surprised or scandalized or angry that people are responding to the incentives he put in place.
As you take a look at the latest Fox News poll, number 3 here, President Obama on health care, approve, disapprove. It hasn't changed much, as you can see, that the disapprove is 53%, up 3 points from January in the approve, but overall still upside down, Chuck.
Yeah, and we'll hear from the Supreme Court on this issue before too long. Look, there are two things we know about any change in economic policy. The first is incentives influence behavior. So putting Staples to one side, what would be the influence on companies of a rule that says you incur extra costs if you hire people for over 30 hours? Well, they'll try to avoid hiring people over 30 hours. And in fact, there is evidence from 538.com's Ben Castleman, who has thoroughly reported the subject, that that is happening across the economy. A roughly 1% percentage point increase in the number of part-time employees who have dropped from 30 to fewer than 30 hours.
But the guy from Cato points out that that was expected and warned about. And
exactly. And that is happening. And this is a total of several 100,000 people. And they are lower wage workers who would probably like to increase their hours, so they're vulnerable people and they're getting hurt. The other thing we know about economic policy is there are winners and losers. Those are the losers in this. There have been some winners from it too, and those would be the people who were working full-time before but now, to get health insurance, but now can work part-time because health insurance to them would be available. I mean, I think for the president to sit there and say, well, Staples is rich, so they should be able to do this, you know, is just, it's nonsense. The company is simply doing what the incentives dictate that they should do, if indeed they are doing it.
Look, first of all, his facts are wrong. Staples has said that the policy in place was instituted a decade ago, so it was not instituted as a way to get around Obamacare. But he makes it sound as if getting around a law, meaning responding to the incentives that are written into the law, is somehow unsavory. I mean, he speaks about this. It's the same way he talks about everything that's private enterprise. You know, he says, well, they make billions of dollars, as if there's something wrong with that, where in fact the billions of dollars of profits are what helps to make the economy run, and that's the source of the millions that are paid in taxes, which support the parasitic government that Obama is running. I mean, that's essentially how capitalism works. The government doesn't make money, it takes it, and it takes it from enterprises that are successful. He simply will not recognize, although I'm sure he's been told since he's never been in the private sector, that when you write a law with specific details, people are going to work with those details to try to minimize expenses. It's rather elementary, but he still doesn't get it.
Meantime, this is a very dangerous time. We've been reporting on it. A lot of things happening around the world. The American Kayla Mueller, the same day she was killed, President Obama made an Obamacare pitch with BuzzFeed. And take a look at this.
Yemen is collapsing before our eyes. We cannot stand by and watch.
The thoughts and prayers of everybody who works here at the White House are with the Mueller family at this time.
Deadline for signing up for health insurance is February 15th. Thanks, Obama.
Mr. President?
Can I live?
You do you.
YOLO, man. All right.
George, thoughts?
Well, some people think this diminishes the presidency. I certainly hope so, because I think the presidency, not this president, but the office itself, is too much with us and far too grand and encrusted in royal trappings. But beyond that, what makes this interesting, he's trying to get people to sign up, and in 37 states, Chuck mentioned a moment ago, the Supreme Court's going to be heard from on this. In 37 states, they're signing up to get subsidies through federal exchanges, which, by the end of June, may be defunct. So this is a small episode on leading up to the biggest Supreme Court decision of the year.
Chuck.
Well, I guess the bottom line here is twofold. The first part is this is kind of a piece with a general message, I guess you could say, that's been emanating from the White House, which is that all those threats you were mentioning, as they put it, are not existential threats. They're problems, they're threats, they're chronic, they're like sort of urban street crime or something.
We can walk and chew gum.
Exactly, but we're going to go on and live our normal lives, you know, while all that's going on, and so maybe you could put it in that category. The other is the degree to which even a tiny increment, perhaps, in additional Obamacare signups that might result from this pitch are valued higher than whatever diminution in the admittedly inflated stature of the presidential office that this might cause. And it's those value judgments that are coming from the White House that are embodied in this.
The president received a lot of backlash when he went and played golf, and there were pictures of him laughing after the beheading of James Foley. This, we're told, happened hours after the announcement that Kayla Mueller was killed, the American woman, by ISIS.
When I saw it this afternoon, I didn't know when he made it. I wasn't offended. I was rather amused by it. And the idea that you could diminish the dignity of a president who gave a one-on-one with someone whose claim to fame is bathing in a tub of Fruit Loops is a rather paradoxical one. So I thought it was okay. But when I learned when he did it, it really is of a piece with playing golf after you learn of the beheading of an American. And that makes it truly distasteful. So if it hadn't happened in conjunction with this horrible event, it just shows you how frivolous he is in executing his office. And that, I think, is not a question of the dignity of the office, of the seriousness of the man.
Next up, the media takes out their knives for Scott Walker.